Picture this. The journey ahead starts here together, and together we can build a brighter future. You are listening to Illuminating Hope, a podcast of Hope House. Meg Nelson holds a Master's of Science in Counseling Psychology and is credentialed with the state of Missouri as a licensed professional counselor and clinical supervisor. Employed with Hope House since 2022, Meg brings extensive experience working with children, adults, and families with a specialization in trauma, substance use, and severe and persistent mental illness. She is thoroughly trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, crisis prevention, de-escalation, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Welcome to the Illuminating Hope podcast. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are one of the therapists in our shelter and outreach program. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
What is your approach when you get a new client in to shelter or the outreach program? What's your approach to helping them?
I think the best way to approach it is meeting the client exactly where they are at. And if that means that we are getting clients maybe on the outreach end that have been out of their abusive situation for a year and have already had a little bit of healing and are ready to kind of continue that journey and they're managing their symptoms really well, that's great. But that also means that we meet those clients that are fresh from that immediate traumatic incident and they're dealing with a variety of symptoms and they might not even know that they are symptoms. And really our job as therapists is to meet that client exactly where they're at, whatever it is that they're coming in with. We're there to help them. And if that means taking things back to the basics and doing a lot of psychoeducation and just educating them about some of these body responses, we have all of those tools necessary to help those clients.
I think we've come a long way in terms of how we as a movement have really dealt with trauma and dealing with survivors. So when I started, I think I've shared this before, that coming in as the first therapist in shelter, I was not well received in the community or by other people in the domestic violence movement because they said I was just saying that survivors are crazy. I'm like, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that they need to have support and they need to have an opportunity to be able to resolve and work through that trauma. However, if we could just take a second and go, let's deal just with the people coming in through shelter, because as you said, it's fresh, it's right there. But we're not approaching that as we are here to solve all of your trauma that you've had your entire life. Talk a little bit about the approach for shelter and how that might be different than how we would with an outreach client who's going to be with us longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things we've done recently in the last few years is changing some of our assessments that we use as therapists in a way of creating a more immediate assessment that we can therapeutically provide those clients coming into shelter to really capture information essential to their mental health. We are asking them if they have knowledge about any of those trauma responses or triggers. What are ways that they feel they are best helped in a crisis? And so just the ability of recognizing some of these needs, recognizing that clients are not necessarily in our services in shelter very long, and we really need to maximize on all of the opportunities that we have with those clients. Whenever they're first coming in between any scheduled therapy sessions, checking in with them. Hey, I know that you had this court date. Is everything going okay? Is there anything I can do with you? And that is quite a bit different than our population that we serve on the outreach end. The people are different. Sometimes the situations, the lethality of situations is very different. So we really have to make sure that we are tailoring our approach and also our assessments just depending on that unique person's needs.
What are some specific needs that you run into, Meg, as a therapist?
The number one need that I run into is clients needing someone to tell them and reaffirm they're not crazy.
Right.
That is across the board. We have clients that come in that have housing needs, legal needs. They are needing to be reconnected with old supports, old family members that maybe they weren't able to have connections through that domestic violence relationship that they have experienced. And so starting from there and letting them know, no, you're not crazy. You are not crazy. And being told that you are crazy,
right,
that in itself is an abusive tactic. And that's something I have noticed, whether they are a shelter client, an outreach client, they just got out of the abusive situation, they've been out for 5 years. That's something that I notice in almost all of our clients.
And you can't really minimize that. I think that emotional abuse that happens in a relationship can be so difficult to overcome. And that degrading and peeling away at someone's self-esteem has such long-term impact that when I was the therapist, that's what that part hasn't changed, that you have to really affirm to them that you didn't make this up, you weren't crazy, this is what you experienced is traumatic, what you experienced is not okay, and it's not your fault.
Absolutely. And now that I'm thinking about it, I would say like secondary, the next thing that I see a lot is clients telling me, well, you didn't hit me, you didn't do this, so it's not that severe, it's not that bad, and I don't want to take someone else's spot on a caseload, on a wait list, because I know others have it worse. And that takes a level of just re-education and reaffirming that just because your experience was different than someone else's does not mean that yours is more or less than another person's, and vice versa. They are all traumatic experiences, and just helping them to know you deserve these services just like everyone else and anyone else does.
I think that's one of the things that strikes me about our work is that the people that we work with often just have little self-worth, that they don't feel like they deserve to take up the space that they're taking up, and they try to make themselves smaller so they're not an inconvenience or they're not in someone's way. And that, I think, is the basis of what we do, is to really help someone to find themselves again and to find you are worthy to be here. You have just as much right to take up space as the next person does. You're not any less than someone else. And I think that's clearly what the crux of our work is, to help someone reclaim their self-esteem and their identity of who they are.
Do you ever see things on the flip side where maybe a client doesn't want to come to therapy, which that is their choice, of course. We take them where they're at because they are trying to prove and convince themselves that they are not what their abuser said. They are not crazy, so they do not need therapy. And then how would we remove the stigma of that?
We absolutely see that, especially within shelter. And I can relate, and I imagine coming in with kids, and maybe you have court involvement, maybe abuser is making hotline reports, and you are doing everything in your power to make it look like we've got all the loose ends, quote unquote, tied up, and just not recognizing that sometimes asking for help, it's not a negative reflection at all. For our therapeutic approach, it's always coming from a place of respect. We respect that you don't want therapy. These are your beliefs and your thoughts of yourself. But hey, here's my office. If you ever need anything, come by, let us know. In the last couple of years, we've created like a coffee hour that's in the shelter therapist office. And there's a coffee maker in there. There's coffee and all of the essentials needed. And right now, Elizabeth, she is offering mushroom coffee. And
that Elizabeth is a saint.
Yep, all of
Gotta
the benefits. And just, it's a time where clients can just swing by, stop by, grab a quick cup of coffee, say hello, or don't. It's totally fine. That office hour is there for you. And sometimes that's a great starting spot, is just checking in. Hey, would you like a cup of coffee? Is there anything I can help with? I think that's very important for clients to have the experience of having a provider come from that perspective to help them to know, and not just a name and a title. I'm a person that's here. I care. It's okay if this isn't a service that you want frequently. No big deal at all. I'm here if and when you need me. And that, I think, is really what sometimes makes the difference of a client potentially making that decision to open up and say, you know what, I'm going to give this new person a chance. And I'm going to open up and I'm just going to see where it goes. And it's that experience which really makes all the difference in clients sometimes making the decision to get into therapy.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions misconceptions about what therapy is. You think about the person laying on the couch and the psychotherapist, taking notes, and that isn't therapy. I mean, that could be therapy, but that isn't what most therapy looks like. I love the idea and that you guys are doing the coffee hour. I might have to do some more conversation about mushroom, but to be able to dispel some of those myths that you're not scary, you're just a normal person, and that you're there to help however they want that help. I think that's just so key, is dispelling those myths about therapy.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing that we try to do, just Hope House in general, is letting those clients know, hey, we're people too. We're here to help you in ways that you're open to and willing to be helped. There's so many staff that love to share their own personal stories about their own DV and things that they've experienced in their lifetime and what drew them to this field. And I think that we really do a great job of working together as a whole, of letting clients know we are human, you are human, we're all family here. And I really love that.
Megan, tell me your why of why you love working here at Hope House, why domestic violence is such an important topic to you personally.
It's important to me because I was at one time one of those people that walked through the door. I was a kid and I came through with my mom. She needed services as she was escaping a domestic violence relationship of her own. And so I definitely remember what it was like as a child, watching that, having so many questions, being confused, sometimes not even having questions to ask because I didn't know what was going on. Having the experience of my mom getting help, my mom being able to begin living the life that she had always dreamed of. As many things happen through the cycle of abuse, I got older, I experienced my own intimate partner violence, and again went through that process of going back to what I had learned at Hope House, what my mom had learned at Hope House, and things that I needed to get myself out of that situation. It comes from just those personal experiences, and it's something where when I was in high school, if you asked me what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a pediatrician because they made lots and lots of money. You go through life and you have these experiences, and you get older, become a young adult, and you have more lived experiences, and it genuinely is absolutely bizarre how life works out. If you would have asked me when I was a young preteen going through it with my mom, where I was going to end up, where I would be at the age of 30, where I am actually at is something that was not even my dream, because at that time I didn't think any of that was possible, so why dream about it? So that's really my why. My why is my mom was a client. I was a kiddo tagging along with my mom in her life journey. And I'll still never forget the day where I was scrolling online and saw that Hope House was hiring for a therapist. And you would have thought I won the lottery, because I'm like, this is for me. I have to have this job. Who do I need to talk? Like, I have to have it. What do I need to do? And it was such an exciting experience. And fast forward 2.5 years, I can't imagine going anywhere else.
I can't believe it's been 2.5 years.
What a short amount of time.
I know. Well, it just flies by.
It does.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
So what are some things that you see with domestic violence that keeps you up at night?
The things that right now currently keep me up at night are, as a new mom myself, I think about and I see every day moms come in, parents come in, dads come in with children. And I remember what it was like as a child. I don't know what it's like as a parent themselves going through DV, but I have that secondary experience now of listening to those stories and hearing them. And sometimes it will be the question of, I don't know why, they missed this appointment. And I reminded them, and I think, when some of these clients come in and they're worried about clothing, they're worried about their car and can he see my car and my job, and can I trust this family member and tell them where I'm at and there's so many other things, and our appointments sometimes come last, and that is okay. So I'm having this experience now as a young mom and experiencing a lot of the typical barriers that we experience as young moms, and having a kid that's screaming in the store, and oh my gosh, what do I do? And then I take a step back and I think about, man, what would this experience be like with that very thick layer of domestic violence going on? And those are really the things right now that keep me up at night, are those moms, especially the young moms that come in, have no support. Sometimes, we get very, very young parents who in some ways are still kids themselves and still have so much growing going to do and need that guidance and support. So it keeps me up at night, but the thing that helps me go to sleep is knowing that I get to be in a position of helping them and supporting them. And if we have clients come in with no support, it helps me greatly to know the number of people at Hope House that are giving them support and that they can count on.
Can we talk just for a little bit about, we really are much more focused on the trauma piece than we ever have, and not just Hope House, but in society. We are talking more about mental health. We're talking more about trauma. Let's talk about the trauma, the responses that people have, and are there coping skills, are there techniques, are there things that you as a therapist would use to help someone who, let's just say it's an outreach client who's come in and is sharing, possibly for the first time, their experiences with the abuse that they've encountered?
Yes, one of the most common things that we see as therapists, and I think just staff in general, is clients reliving that trauma. And that means that even though they are sitting in my office, we are safe, it is just us, their abuser is not around, their brain and body are having the same reactions that they had when that trauma was actually happening. And so being able to first help the client to recognize that that's what's going on. And our first go-to is using a variety of grounding techniques to ground them in the moment, in the place, in the time, to help reprogram their brain and body to recognize that they're no longer in that situation, around that person, and they're able to take back control of their brain and their body. One of my absolute favorite things to do is using the 5 senses. And I love it because every time that I think about, okay, well, what are the 5 senses? I really have to stop and I have to really think, what are all of them? And once you go through the 5 senses, you're looking around the room around you, the environment, you yourself, and finding, what are 5 things I can see? What are 4 things that I can touch? 3 things that I can hear? And you're going through the list and first of all, breaking that obsession or breaking that attention to the trauma, to the traumatic incident, to the abuser, and shifting that energy somewhere else. But then also giving your brain a chance to just take a break. Deprogram, unplug, focus on other things. I often tell clients, go through the 5 senses and just look for basic stuff. Go through it, let a couple minutes pass. And then the second time that you do it, look at things that are specific. What are 5 things in this room that are pink? What are 4 things that are smooth? What are 3 things that I don't like to hear right now that I'm hearing? Maybe it's a hum. Maybe it's the clicking of earrings. Who knows? Oftentimes, as going through that grounding technique progression from general to specific, clients will get to the end of it and find themselves feeling some sort of relief. The goal is not 0 because that is not always realistic. It's not realistic to imagine our human lives as having 0 anxiety, because if you go on a camping trip and open up your tent and there's a bear there, I would hope you have anxiety to run or do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. What is a level that we can bring our symptoms down that are manageable? That is really our goal, is to get those clients to a place, get the mental health to a place where it is manageable and it is stable. Once clients either leave our shelter or are able to completely successfully achieve all of their therapeutic domestic violence and mental health goals for us, we're able to connect them with other outside resources to essentially take the baton. And if there are childhood traumas, if there are other lifetime traumas, maybe there are other specific issues that need more of an expert in that space. Substance use, eating disorders, OCD, more severely, persistently mentally ill. We're able to start that therapeutic process. We're able to focus on the most immediate trauma, get clients restabilized, and ensure that we collaborate with the community to ensure that that client continues their healing if they decide to.
Since we're talking about shelter clients, do you notice, because of the trauma that they've endured, that the longer you see them, more will come out or different will come out about their stories? And can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. The first step is gaining our trust, and we understand that, and that in itself takes a good amount of time. As we're peeling back those layers of a client's life, their mental health, their memories, their trauma responses, it's very fascinating what the brain does, especially with memory. The human brain only has a certain capacity. So when clients come in to shelter for the first time, straight from a very traumatic incident, their memory is impacted. They may only remember the details of the most immediate event and really struggle with details of memories prior to that. It can be the complete opposite. They have very, very detailed, great memories of the prior events prior in their life, but these DV events, they don't have the memories for. And that's the fascinating part about the brain. We really start from the basics, gain that trust and respect, build this great relationship, do this education, and we do find that by peeling back those layers, oftentimes memories do begin to come up. And it can be memories of things that they never knew happened. It can also be going back to certain memories and looking at it from a different perspective and recognizing, I see how that was abusive. I didn't know the abuse started way before the first physical event. And that's a really great process to help a client through, because that is really when a great deal of healing happens. It's helping that client have a great understanding for what has happened to them in the past, what's happening to them currently, and then begin making plans and goals of how do we continue to support you now that we're here.
I think that whole process that you've talked about is also one of the things that can be very problematic for a survivor if they're going through the court system or dealing with law enforcement. And we've done, I think, just really a great job of partnering with our local law enforcement and doing education so that they can understand, and they've been so receptive to that, and I really am grateful that we have that. But that can be very difficult for someone who does not understand the response to trauma, and that somebody's story would change, or for somebody to say, I don't remember, and people are like, how can you not remember? How do you not remember such a significant event that happened? But it really is about the brain. And if you also then add on top of that strangulation and things that definitely impact the brain and what, the oxygen getting to the brain, that kind of stuff, that complicates it as well. So I think it's really critical that we make sure that as an agency that we're also educating so that people can better understand that it is a normal response to trauma to not have those vivid memories.
We talked about, Meg, what keeps you up at night. The first time a client is believed and believed by you. Tell me about how the client responds to being believed for the first time.
The way that a client responds is more so nonverbal than verbal. You see a difference in the person's body orientation, in their posture, in their eyes. And it's such a beautiful thing to see, that complete sigh of relief, that sigh of, okay, I can let my walls down just a little bit because I don't need to convince this person. It's something that whenever we bring in new staff, we're training interns, we do a really great job of helping them to recognize what that looks like. And when it happens, taking the time to allow it to happen, taking the time to say, what's it like for you to hear that? Have you ever heard this before? And taking that pause on the conversation to let the client really allow that feeling, that response to sink in. And that makes it all worth it.
So they can process and enjoy the moment and understand that, because a lot of clients probably have been gaslighted so much that maybe they are convinced they're crazy, or it just didn't happen. So once they're validated and they get to process that, I bet it's such a weight.
Yeah, it is. And it's such a skill to know when that timing is and being able to press pause. It happens a lot when clients come in and maybe they have experienced a lot of domestic violence, and they will sometimes tell their story by jumping from event to event. And while as a therapist or even a human being checking in and saying, oh, was that difficult for you? And how often clients move past it. And no, it's just something that happened. And yeah, it was hard, but we moved past it. And then this happened. And well, I couldn't wait to think about this first experience because another experience happened. And allowing that client the safe space to press pause, to look back, to reflect, to think about how is that affecting you right now? Us sitting with that. That's not something that most of these clients have had the freedom or access to be able to do. And that's such an important part of their mental health as a lifelong journey, being able to press pause, take a break, but also also reflect, so that way you can determine what it is that you need in the moment to continue going forward.
That's such an important point, because you did bring up being at a campground and seeing a bear, fight or flight, what's your trauma response. But when that bear never leaves,
yes,
it does something to the brain, and you cannot pause. Amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
So the fight flight, I was just at a workshop where they talked about a new response, the fawning. What do you know about that, and are we doing anything with that?
Yeah, so with the fawning, that comes from a place of fawning down to this power against you or over you or something that you are fearful of. That may look like falling in line with what they're doing, what they're saying, being obedient to them, being loyal to them, because the question is, if I don't, then what? Fawning is a way that clients have survived and actually have kept themselves safe. That's a big thing for us to educate a client on, because sometimes the fawning comes along with shame and guilt. Why didn't I? Why didn't I just do this or do that? Because by making that decision, it could have made that experience, that abuser, much more lethal. So in some ways, by strategically trying to plan, if you're able to, your escape, that is how you have possibly kept yourself, your children alive. So it's very important for us to help those clients recognize that there are different responses to fear, to trauma, helping to re-educate, break down some of the stereotypes between just fight and flight, but also connecting it to how that trauma response was a strength in some ways. It's not just something that has only negative connotation with it.
I was glad to see that they were looking at that, because when you think about that trauma with the long term, it doesn't go away. That fight, flight, or freeze doesn't always work in those situations, so that they're coming up with new ways of being able to talk about it, because we've known that this is what survivors do, but to now have a name and have it be a part of another conversation or that larger conversation, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And to normalize it too, because that is something that happens so much with victims and survivors of almost any kind of trauma, but specifically domestic violence.
That longer term, chronic, never ending. I'd also like to just take a couple of minutes to talk about the clients who come to us that need more than what we're able to give them. There are situations where someone has mental health issues that are beyond our scope, because we do not have psychiatrists, we don't have medical professionals. Our therapists are all very, very good and they're licensed, but that only takes one so far. So let's talk about someone who might come in who has more mental health needs than what we're capable of handling.
Yeah, our job is to make sure that we are doing a very thorough assessment of these clients to first start out and just determine, is there anything that we need to refer out for, anything that the client could best benefit from an expert in that area, from a more specialized treatment for that particular thing. So through that assessment, sometimes that assessment does result in an immediate referral. That does not mean that they do not get therapeutic assistance with us at Hope House. That can look like us providing domestic violence education and continued support to the client, crisis support, checking in with the client, groups, while an outside provider or agency is doing majority of their mental health treatment. That can also look like clients continuing their mental health treatment with us and potentially seeing another provider for a specialized area, such as grief, such as eating disorder, substance use. So that's the other part that I really enjoy specifically about working in the clinical department with Hope House, is the fact that it is not, we just cut all ties with you. You continue to receive our support. You can continue to receive a variety of services that we're able to provide in our therapy department. But it's so important for us to be transparent and us to ensure that in that transparency, we're letting the client know we want to do what is best for your mental health. And I want to make sure that you're with all of the best people. It's hard to do, but I think at the same time, it really adds to that mutual respect that we have with our clients. clients.
And they can always come back, too. If somebody leaves, we are able to bring them back if that's what they choose to do.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I know that we get asked all the time is, what do we define as success? So I would be curious just to hear what your thoughts are on that. I know how I answer that question, but I would like to hear how you would answer that.
I would say I'll give a pretty broad perspective, because success depends on each unique individual person. Some clients, their success might mean coming in and getting very important, needed domestic violence education. Maybe that's all they want. Maybe that's all they need. To another client, that might mean getting domestic violence education, lowering their anxiety or depression symptoms, connecting with outside supports and agencies in the community. It looks different for each client, and that's why each client has a different specialized treatment plan to ensure that we're meeting their unique needs in a unique, individualized way. One thing that I have just kind of picked up in my time working with Hope House is, especially working with our shelter population, is clients, when they come into shelter, it's often, in their eyes and perspective, not a rainbows and sunshine experience. Many clients have told me that they feel like they're at rock bottom, and maybe they have said to me, one in the last couple months said, I thought I was at rock bottom when I was with my abuser, but now I'm really at rock bottom because I don't even have a house. I think it's very important for clients and anyone out there to know that coming to Hope House, it is very far from rock bottom, because we are the safety net that catches you before you hit rock bottom. We're the safety net to make sure that that doesn't happen. I would want our listeners to know that, and know that there are so many ways that Hope House is able to be a safety net to these individuals and to the community, and that is the reason why the work that we do is so important.
I would have to agree 100%. I know after this episode, I am going to take pause more in my day. I think that's so important. And Meg, what you and the therapists here at Hope House do, I have said over and over again, and I will continue to say, you are second to none. Thank you so much for all you do for Hope House and our clients.
Thank you.